With the Reds offseason landing mostly with a thud, help is going to have to come from within. Doug Gray checks in today to talk about the help that is on the way.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Reds. My name is Jeff Carr. His name is Steve Offenbaker, and we are lifelong Cincinnati Reds fans. We've been podcasting about the Reds for like a combined 14 years now, and Locked On Reds is for the Reds fan that knows what happened. They want to know why. And on today's Locked On Reds podcast, we're going to tell you why the future is bright. It's just not as close as we hoped when it comes to the prospects in the minor leagues. There are some, at least on the pitching side, who are going to help here soon. We'll get into all of that here in just a few minutes. We're also going to talk about some of the international signings, why the Reds had a certain approach to this international signing period that is encouraging. But we are going to start, of course, with how this offseason has all begun. And we're doing that with special guest Doug Gray from redsminorleaguescom and redlegnation.com. Doug's been on the show before, but it's actually been a little bit of a while. I'm glad to get him back on today, and that's on today's podcast that is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. But let's start first with this busy off season. The Reds have been signing everybody. No, wait, that's the Dodgers. The Dodgers have been signing everybody. The Reds have gotten a couple of people, and they haven't really filled what we thought was their biggest need. When you look at the offseason to this point, what is your main takeaway?
Inaction. It's weird to say that because I feel like of all the teams in Major League Baseball, the Reds kind of kicked things off with the Brady Singer, Jonathan India trade. That gave us some false sort of impression kind of thing where they're going to really get to it and kind of go out and fill their needs. And, they've been talking about trading Jonathan India for what feels like 3 years, and they finally did it. So maybe this is them, they see, we've got Hunter Green, we've got Rhett Lauder, Ellie De La Cruz broke out in a big way. Like this is our time to push it in and just go for it. And then, they didn't really do much until they made the Gavin Lux trade, which, I'm not upset with that trade. I feel like that for the most part, most people are like, okay, it's a solid deal. At worst, it's a solid deal. But that's pretty much it. Yeah. They're bringing Nick Martinez back, which is fine. They're bringing back Brent Suter, which is kind of weird that they were just like, oh, yeah, we're going to decline the option and then re-sign him immediately. But as far as additions go from last year, did it move the needle much for you guys? Because it didn't really for me. I think that it raises the floor just a little bit on the win total the team could have, but I'm not really sure it raises the ceiling that much either. And
we've been talking about it teetering at for me anyway, if we're going to put letter grades on things, it teeters just at the top level of a C+ offseason for me, because I do feel like, bringing in Singer helps stabilize the rotation a little bit. I do feel like that if somebody's got to be a utility player defensively, and you were going to use Jonathan India in that role, I think Gavin Lux would be a little bit better defensively in that role than Jonathan India would be. I don't know how much he's going to outproduce him at the plate, but I think he's better defensively. So there's little things where I'm like in the C+ range, but I really needed a right-handed outfield bat in order to get into the, a B off season, trending higher and higher towards an A, depending on who that outfielder was. So I'm a little disappointed in where they're at in the off season. I'm trying to find things to be excited about and look for, silver linings in the clouds and hope that those things combined with the guys that are coming back from injury, the guys that they'll have this year that they didn't have last year, will be enough to make the team a contender in the National League Central. But, you got to work at it a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm starting to wonder is are the Reds betting too much on the scouting reports of the guys coming back from injury? Like, better than anybody, the scouting reports of CES and Matt McLain and guys like that. It feels as though they're just saying, well, yeah, they're going to come back from injury and we're going to get exactly what's on that scouting report, as opposed to going out and getting that bona fide middle of the order type of guy.
I think that you kind of have to go with Matt McLain He had a really good rookie season. The other guys, though, I mean, they've never done anything really at the big league level to say, hey, this should be our guy. Now, I'm willing to give those guys chances, but at the same time, if you're really trying to compete this year, I mean, should you be locked in at CES as one of your 26 guys? Noel Marte is one of your 26 guys? I mean, right. I'm with Steven. No, I really don't think that you should.
Right.
You need a little bit more certainty. And if those guys play well enough to, make the 26-man roster, become stars, great. That's awesome. But, I hate to even bring this up because I feel like I've been getting in arguments with people the last couple of days about it. But, the Los Angeles Dodgers just came off a World Series, and all they keep doing is adding more and more depth. And, if somebody that's good doesn't get to have that job because somebody else is better, that's great. That's exactly what you want.
Right.
The Reds, they're not really in that position, and it seems like that they're not really putting themselves in that position.
But they added Alex Young, Doug. They brought him back. I mean, we're feeling good, right?
I mean, I get that. That's fine. Yeah, and I understand that you were being a little bit facetious there, but
right.
It's everybody brings.
Was
in
he
guys
though?
Like that,
Was he really? Was he being
so.
facetious? You see what I have to put up with around here?
Yeah, but look out your window.
Oh,
Feel a little bit better now?
Yeah, I do feel a little bit better.
Yeah, because it's like 3 degrees outside my window.
No, listen. People operate under the false narrative that it's always wonderful in Hawaii, and I want you to know that it was so cold last night that I actually had to sleep with a light blanket on the bed. It got really, really cold.
Have you thought about moving?
You didn't sleep outside under the stars on the sand like you always do, like. But no,
I love it.
I find that intriguing to me because if you're looking at this roster, like you mentioned, it felt like it was time to really go for it, really get a big dude, spend more, maybe sign a contract that they've not done. And with them not doing that, do you think that it says more that they are trusting the addition of Terry Francona, or more that they think they're further away than we are expecting them to be?
I mean, I think it's pretty simple. They don't have the money. The ownership group isn't giving them the money to do any sort of significant thing. I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't think they expected Nick Martinez to sign his qualifying offer. I think that they probably went into the offseason thinking he's going to decline it. We're going to have, $30 million to spend, and maybe they were planning on making an actual move that cost money. And then Nick Martinez kind of looked at the market and figured, hey, maybe it's better to just take $21.5 million and see what happens. And that kind of put the Reds in a weird spot because you are getting a quality player back with Nick Martinez, but I don't think that they actually plan on him taking that, and it might have kind of messed up their plans just a little bit.
I've kind of wondered that myself, Doug, and we'll never know, right? Nobody from the Reds will ever come out and say like, well, damn, that really caught us off guard. But right. I've wondered that myself, if they were a little bit stunned when Nick Martinez was like, yeah, all right, let's go. Nick Rowe was probably going, well, crap, what are we going to do now?
Yeah.
So based on what they've done, I kind of look at them as like an 82-win team, and if everything goes right, maybe they're in that playoff conversation right now. Is that kind of where you're at?
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what Major League Baseball wanted when they added that extra playoff spot. Is it allows more teams to kind of just shoot for 500, and if things go right, hey, you're in the playoff race at the end of July, and maybe you can make a trade and go from there. It takes the risk away from a lot of these teams. And I mean, I don't think that's good for baseball because I think that it leads to a lot of teams striving to be mediocre and hope for the best rather than trying to be good. And it just seems like there's a lot of teams in baseball that are fairly content being an 83-win team on paper, because if things go right for you, hey, you did a good job. And if things go wrong for you, you can point to it and be like, oh, well, this guy got hurt and that guy got hurt. And there's no real, hey, man, you messed up. You should have done a better job putting this team together.
And the only team that can't complain about that is the MLB The Show Dodgers, the Los Angeles Deferrals, whatever we want to call them. There's lots.
I'm going to call them World Series champions, Jeff.
Yeah, that's probably, they are the current ones. Who knows? They might go back to back.
Well, with those off-season grades not really getting any of us excited, help is going to have to come from within. And coming up, Doug gets into the help that is on the way from AAA.
In sports, having a winning strategy is everything. It's how the best teams make it to the Super Bowl, the World Series, and the Olympics. The same goes for life. Having a strategy like life insurance from Select Quote can protect your financial legacy and keep your family's future secure. Select Quote makes it easy to find the perfect life insurance policy. What sets Select Quote apart is their personal touch. Unlike other brokers that offer one-size-fits-all policies, their licensed agents tailor coverage to fit your unique needs. If you're in good health, you might even qualify for same-day coverage of up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And it's more affordable than you'd think. You can get up to $1 million in coverage for as little as $20 a month. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/locked on. Go to selectquote.com/locked on today and get started. That's selectquote.com/locked on. Select Quote. They shop, you save.
We're talking about the Reds here today, every day, all offseason, all spring training, all regular season, and hopefully in the postseason. We got you covered right here on Locked On Reds. Let's dive back into our conversation with Doug Gray from redsminorleagues.com and redlegnation.com, where he is going to talk to us about the help that is in the Reds minor league system right now.
So with that being said, the Reds, as much as they are not big spenders in free agency or trades or something like that, they constantly keep telling us they want to build from within, draft, develop, build from within, call them up, everything like that. When we look at the Reds farm system right now, there's two groups of people that keep talking about the Reds farm system. There's a group that says, yes, they have prospects that they can trade away and get big league talent from. And then there's another group that says this team has been falling down the farm system rankings and the future isn't quite as bright as it was just a few years ago. I think a lot of that just has to do with all of the graduations to Major League Baseball. But when you kind of look at the system as a whole, do you think that there are guys who are close to the big leagues that are going to give them that added oomph this year? Or are we still a couple of years away from more of that happening?
So I think that both groups of people in your description there could be correct.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that there is guys that they could trade and afford to trade to bring in talent. But I do think that there are a few guys that are close-ish to helping that could help this year. I think that, unfortunately, I know Steven was talking about earlier, he wanted a right-hand hitting outfielder. That guy doesn't exist. Not for this year. But I think that Chase Petty, Chase Burns, I think that those guys could help at some point this year. Petty might be a little bit closer. I think he had 2 starts at the end of the year in AAA. And, Chase Burns has never thrown a professional pitch in a game, but, he's the number 2 overall pick in the draft, dominated in college. He should move quickly. I think that in theory, at least, he could move quicker than Rhett Lauder did last year if the opportunity, of course, presents itself to reach the big leagues. That's all.
And that's the same format they use with Rhett Lauder. He didn't pitch and then we saw him in the big leagues that first season. So just as a reminder to everybody, just because he didn't pitch last year doesn't mean he couldn't advance all the way to the majors. It's not as likely, but it could happen.
Yeah, and you're right. I do think that it's not as likely just because the Reds do have more starting pitcher depth this year. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons that Rhett Lauder got called up. I mean, he had 1 start in AAA before he got called up. And he probably had 8 or 9 good starts in AA, but he kind of struggled for the first 8 or 9 starts in AA too. And then just something kind of clicked for him and everything went, real quick. But, I think that might be the one thing that holds Chase Burns or even Chase Petty back a little bit by comparison. It's just because there's a little bit more depth, but hey, we're all Reds fans. Outside of 2012, you used, 15 starting pitchers a year. So, there's going to be opportunities in all likelihood. Offensively, I just don't see somebody there. I mean, you've got those outfielders that we kind of saw last year, Blake Dunn, Jacob Hurtubise, Reese Hines. They all kind of showed some little itty bitty part of their game that was big league ready, but I don't think that any of them are, ready to come in and help from day one in a starting role. Edwin Arroyo, maybe, but who knows? He's coming off shoulder surgery. He's played a handful of games in AA 2 seasons ago. He's going to need time. And let's just say he does well. Well, where's he going to play? He's shortstop. He's not playing over Ellie. So, okay, second base, he's not playing over Matt McLain. Third base, we'll see, maybe. But, There's just not that straight line opportunity for him, and he's still got to prove a lot in the upper minor leagues where he's never really played.
Let's talk about another position group for just a minute, because Jeff and I, we're by no means minor league system experts at all. We leave that to you. It's too much to keep track of. I don't know how you do it. But looking at the catcher position, Doug, Jeff and I both have felt that this was the offseason that the Reds needed to give some type of extension to Tyler Stevenson. Looking around behind him, it feels like it's an empty room right now. And I know way down the pipeline, there are some exciting guys, but you don't know if they're going to hit. There was a time where we were talking about, wow, they've got Veuhin, they've got Matt Nelson, they've got all these guys. Wow. And where
I said that name in a while.
They disappeared. So looking at the catcher position, is there somebody to be excited about? Is there somebody that that really you willing to stick your neck out right now and say they're going to be the guy that makes it to the majors, or is the position as a whole in trouble throughout the system?
Well, I don't know who you were listening to that was talking about Veuhin.
Jeff Carr.
Just like saying the name. It was a great name.
I was listening to this guy over here.
But yeah,
it's a fun name to say. But I mean, neither one of those guys were ever considered top prospects. I mean, I think that Alfredo Duno, he spent the first 6 or 7 weeks in Daytona last year before he got hurt and then missed the rest of the season. But I mean, he's going to be 19 years old this year, and he's caught 25 professional games. I mean, he's still got a long ways to go. Catcher's not a position that you see guys just kind of rocket up the minor leagues. There's so much more that they have to learn and get through to reach that level. So yeah, I don't really. I mean, first off, the catcher position in Major League Baseball right now is just abysmal. Realistically, when I think about what a starting catcher should be, and I look around Major League Baseball, there's like 15 of those guys. Like there's not 30 quality starting catchers in the big leagues, which means that the guys behind them are even worse. The guys behind those guys are even worse. So I do think that part of it is we've got expectations for what we think the position should be, and the quality's just not there for that. You're either good or you're not. Like I feel like the middle class of catcher does not exist in Major League Baseball right now. And so, I'm with you. I'd love to see them extend Tyler Stevenson, and maybe they have, and we just don't know. If there's one thing that we all know that, from us that cover the Reds, they keep things pretty tight to the vest. When we hear Reds rumors, it's from somebody's agent on the other side of the deal. It's never coming from the Red side of things. And, maybe they just haven't been able to work something out with Stevenson because, he has these things in mind that he wants, and they're not willing to offer that, which, frankly, wouldn't surprise me. Remember what happened with Luis Castillo and the extension that he signed, and how his agent said that, they barely talked to him about a deal before they traded him. Maybe it's just a financial thing where they just don't know what they've got and what they can get. But yeah, I think that if the Reds are going to look internally for somebody behind Tyler Stevenson, it's going to be a while. And if they look on the market, well, I just don't think there's anything there, because anybody that's going to satiate what we feel they should bring in, that guy's probably good enough to be a starter for somebody else. So why would they come to Cincinnati to be a backup to Tyler Stevenson?
And that's kind of where I was. And I was glad that they ended up making the trade for Jose Trevino, because looking at the different guys that were available, I feel like Elias Diaz was the only free agent that I was even remotely excited about. And then he signed a deal that was like, okay, he's going to be the everyday guy, or, the catcher one for that team. I think it's interesting that they brought back Austin Wynns, maybe see him a little bit, but again, not catcher of the future. He's just a depth guy. There's nobody that really excites me there. What about in the bullpen? Because I feel like the Reds are continually linked, and as any team should be, you always need bullpen help. But I kind of don't feel like there's that guy that's coming up. Zach Maxwell is the only guy that is on the forefront of my mind, like kind of excited to see him maybe make it to the majors. Do you think he makes it to the majors? And is he going to be an impact guy for them?
So I'd say that you'd also probably want to talk about Luis May if you're going to talk about Zach Maxwell. Very similar guys, huge fastballs. Both of them throw over 100 miles per hour fairly consistently. Both guys have good secondary pitches, but both guys also walk everybody and your mom. And that's a problem. And so, you ask, is that a guy that's going to reach the majors? They'll both probably reach the majors. but will they be reliable? Will they be more than up and down guys because they can't throw consistent strikes? I probably wouldn't bet on it. I mean, they both have closer upside, but they've also got the upside to, walk 4 guys every other time they take the mound, and that just doesn't work. And I mean, you have not. I mean, they've both shown a little bit of progress since they signed or were drafted in that control. But they're both still walking 6 to 7 guys per 9 innings, and that's just too much. You cannot do that against Major League Baseball hitters in today's era. Maybe in 1950, when a bunch of guys couldn't hit the ball out of the infield, it didn't hurt you as much if you had a higher walk rate. But the worst hitter on a Major League team can now hit the ball 400 feet. So those walks, you pay a little bit more for them.
The Cincinnati Reds have wanted to position themselves as a pitching factory. So how are they doing with that? What's Derek Johnson looking like? Is he the wizard that we all believe that he is? Doug's going to dive into that with us next.
You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets to events with Game Time. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Game Time is the app that Jeff and I both use when we head down to Reds games. We go find our favorite restaurant, have some dinner, grab a drink, and then right about time for first pitch, we jump on the Game Time app, we grab our tickets, and walk across the street to the stadium. It's just that easy. We get great deals, very greatly discounted prices. If you're going to a venue, they don't just have baseball. You can get hockey. You can get basketball. You can get all of the sports on Game Time. If you don't know the venue you're going to, just jump on there. They've got a view from your seat, and with all-in pricing, you know exactly what you are going to pay, and you're going to get $20 off. Again, just download that Game Time app, create your account, use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create your account and redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time.
If you can't watch the show on YouTube, you can listen to us on your favorite podcasting app. Seriously, we're on all of them. Make sure that you follow us on whatever your favorite podcasting app is. That's something too, and I know that they have said this in so many different words, but it feels like the Reds have tried to position themselves as a team that is going to develop pitching more so than hitting, and then they can acquire hitting as needed, become like a pitching factory like a Cleveland or something like that. Where do you kind of put them on that? Because I thought while you were kind of describing Zach Maxwell and Luis May, I was thinking of guys like Dauri Moreta or Cianel Perez, where it's like they were not that great here because of the walk issue, and then they go somewhere else and it seems like they develop a little bit more. Cianel Perez being almost like a closer 1B, 1C for the Orioles, and then Dauri Moreta being a lockdown back of the bullpen guy for the Pirates when he's healthy. Is there a deficiency there? Because I tend to think of Derek Johnson as a bit of a wizard, but there's definitely been some chinks in that armor a little bit.
So I think that Moreta was just one of those situations where he didn't get much time in Cincinnati, and he struggled. But when he was in the minor leagues, he didn't walk anybody. He was very good. He had very good control. So I think that might have just been a situation where he was just trying to figure things out a little bit at the big league level and just didn't get a long enough opportunity to pitch for the Reds specifically to kind of show that he could take that next step and kind of get back to what he was in the minor leagues. Cianel Perez, that was a complete surprise to me as to kind of what he turned into after he left.
Wanted to rename 71 the Cianel Perez Highway because of how many times he went between Cincinnati and Louisville.
Yeah. But, I think that, while the Reds do have that lack of relief pitchers in the minor leagues, most relievers aren't relief pitchers in the minor leagues. They're starters. And then they get moved into the bullpen from the rotation because one, either isn't enough room, or two, a lot of guys, they're starting pitchers because they can handle the workload, but they don't necessarily have that third quality pitch that'll get major leaguers out. But, rather than having them to pitch 40 to 60 innings in the minors and get less experience, you can throw 120 innings in the minors as a starter, get more experience, more time to work on whatever it is that they think you need to work on. And then, if that opportunity isn't there for them or they don't quite develop, whether it's that third pitch or, the control that you need as a starter, but you can get away with a little bit as a reliever, then you make that move once they get to AAA. And I think that maybe that's a route that we can't really forecast right this second, but where the Reds could go, because they are building a lot of starting pitching depth. There's not going to be room for everyone.
So that leads me to a guy I wanted to talk to you about, and that's Connor Phillips, because he seemingly got the pitching version of the yips and just forgot how to be a pitcher. I don't know what was going on with him. They send him out to Arizona for most of the season, it seemed like, and we haven't seen him yet this year to know where he's at. Is that a guy you could see ending up in the bullpen and maybe even in the Reds bullpen this year?
I mean, even when they traded for him before he kind of had any of these issues, I mean, he had some walk issues, but not like he had last year. I mean, most scouts felt there was a solid chance he was going to wind up in the bullpen. That third pitch was kind of not there, and then he did have some control issues. And, there's like, maybe that's a relief profile. And, if it were up to me, I mean, there's no chance he'd make the team out of spring training. I don't care how good he pitched. But if he goes to AAA and pitches well, then yeah, I think that he could be a guy that profiles quite well in the bullpen. His control, even when he's at his best control, isn't great. But like I said, you can get away with that in the bullpen a little bit more. There's a little bit more leeway, especially when you only have to throw 1, maybe 2 innings. And that's a role that I think that he could fit well with if he can get back to being able to throw strikes semi-consistently. Because I mean, nobody's going to ever argue that he doesn't have good enough stuff. It's always been about executing. Wow, that was I don't know what that word was. Executing with his command and throwing strikes.
That's something too. Like we talked a lot about Chase Burns, Chase Petty, the chases, and there's a little bit of Rhett Lauder, but I think since we've seen him at the major league level, we understand he's going to be a part of this team this year. Connor Phillips may be a dark horse to be in the bullpen, something like that. Who's the next wave behind this? Because I know there were some movers and shakers when it came to the rankings in the 20s to teens range, but who do fans not know now, but they probably will by the end of the season?
I'm not really sure, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I just think that once you kind of get beyond those first couple of guys, nobody really stands out for their stuff. So it's tough to envision somebody really taking a huge leap, like somebody who can throw upper 90s with a good breaking ball and has control, and really skyrocketing up there. It seems like everybody else is kind of in one of those, like, okay, they've got okay stuff. You can, if you squint, you can see a big league starting pitcher there, but I think that pretty much all of those guys are going to take a big step forward to kind of really jump out onto the scene and kind of push their way up.
And so one of the last things I kind of wanted to talk about today, Doug, appreciate having you and giving us some of your time. The Reds did make some international signings. They weren't named Roki Sasaki. I was a little bit bummed about that. But they made some international signings. And while there's not really a name that a lot of folks on social media grabbed and said, oh boy, this guy was highly ranked in the international class and stuff like that, what have you been hearing about the different players that are coming in, and who are you excited to see in the Red system this year?
So, this year's class outside of Sasaki, from what I've been hearing, what I've been hearing, what I've been told, it's a little bit lower over the last couple of years than the overall classes in baseball in the last couple of years. The Reds didn't get a top signing, but what's interesting is they got a lot of signings, and they kind of spread their money out pretty well. It's not like they signed, one guy with a big contract or signing bonus and then just kind of filtered in some lower level signings. They had a lot of guys in that middle tier, and when I think that's a really good plan if you're in a situation where you don't feel that the overall group of available players is really good. You get more chances with those middle tier guys where somebody might break out. Maybe somebody hits that growth spurt. Maybe somebody, just kind of figures out that one thing that you weren't sure about when because again, we're talking 15 and 16-year-old kids when you kind of come to deals with these guys. So you don't really know what's going to happen. Libert Zaponte was their big signing. And he got $1.9 million, and that's nothing to sneeze at. He was a top 20 ranked guy in pretty much every ranking system you wanted to look at for this class. Amazing defender. Like, people were just raving about how good of a defensive player he is. The bat needs some work. He's going to need to get stronger. But even if you project it out well, he's maybe an average hitter, which is fine. If you're going to be a defensive wizard at shortstop and you're an okay hitter, that's a very, very good player. He's probably the guy most people are familiar with who've looked into this because he was the biggest signing. The one guy that's really interesting to me is Angel Salio. Now, he had originally agreed to a deal with the Rockies, but that fell through. He signed with the Reds, and his deal with the Rockies was over $1 million, and that fell through. He didn't quite get that much from the Reds, but he was a guy that really he stands out a lot. I mean, he's 6'3", 180 pounds, is a 16-year-old. There's plenty of room to fill out. He's a very good athlete. He's already had exit velocities over 100 miles per hour when he was 15 years old. And that's with a wooden bat, by the way. Like, that's not your high school kid that's doing it with an aluminum bat. Like, I mean, he's really interesting. He's a little bit raw, but I think that of the class, he's the guy that's kind of under the radar a little bit that could really become somebody in a couple of years.
And what have you heard too? And one guy I wanted to get just a mite more of information on, because I don't have very much on him, is the guy that the Reds just acquired from the Dodgers in order to give them more money to sign Roki Sasaki. And Steve, if you would please deliver that name for us.
I can't do it. I'm
Arnoldo
telling you,
Arnoldo
as soon as you started that intro, I started hearing Kokomo in my head again. I don't know. I'm gonna have to just like set a Locked On Reds. Here we go, guys. When I talk about a player named Kokomo, I mean this dude, because I can't say his name.
Okay, so first off, I just want to say that I think this was a great pickup by the Reds. They picked up a guy who signed a little over a year ago for $700,000, and they got him for $0. They traded the Dodgers $1 million in bonus pool space, but they didn't actually send $1 to the Dodgers for this. They just gave the Dodgers the ability to spend $1 million. So they got this kid for basically free because, while they had that money to spend on players, those players weren't available. Whereas the Dodgers are going to spend that on, to get Sasaki, who we all wish would have signed with the Reds. But that's a different story. So we're talking about the Reds added a high-level international prospect just a year after he signed. And what's interesting, he didn't really hit very well in his first year. And then he absolutely crushed the ball his second year. Now, he did repeat the Dominican Summer League. He was still just 18 years old. But, so some people are going to hold that against him a little bit. And I can understand that. But I think it's also important to note that, he made clear adjustments from year one to year two. And he was one of the best hitters in the league. He's got big time power. That's kind of always been the selling card for him. But this past year, he made more contact. He's a pretty good athlete, probably going to wind up in right field, even though he's played some center. But I very shrewd move by the Reds there. He's a lottery ticket. He's never played even in the United States before. And I think he just turned 19 years old. So he's going to be far away, and it's going to take some time if it ever happens for him. But this was an upside play, and really it cost him nothing. So I really like that move.
He is Doug Gray. I appreciate you getting on the show with us here, Doug. I know you got a lot of stuff coming up here on redsminorleagues.com and redlegnation.com. What are we looking at? Is it ranking season, or has that already happened?
So ranking season is sort of kind of still happening. All of my rankings are out, but I'm still working my way through the individual write-ups with the full scouting reports, season reviews for the top 25. But I think that'll be done next week. I should be done with the top 25, and then I just kind of move on to, other interesting prospects kind of as we head into spring training, which I guess minor league spring training is what, 6 weeks away from now.
It's like
big league spring training's like less than a month away. Like, where did the offseason go, guys? Where did it go?
It makes me think of not snow and not single-digit temperatures, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, but then again, I can also look out this window over here, and I still see snow outside. So,
really appreciate getting to talk with Doug and really breaking down this farm system, because it's something that you and I, Steve, we talk about a lot throughout the offseason of like, yeah, they could trade this prospect, they trade that prospect, trade this prospect. It kind of feels like Doug isn't that far off either. He's not a guy that's like, yes, no, you can't trade anybody. You must keep all the prospects. He agrees with us. You want to make that big league club better. And some of those prospects are closer to that. We will discuss this a lot more throughout the rest of the week. We're also going to look at a couple of key moves that the Reds could make within their own organization. And we're going to answer some key offseason questions coming up on our next Locked On Reds podcast, which will be coming at you live tomorrow, Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Hope you join us on our YouTube page. Audio will be out shortly thereafter. But until then, you can trust that we will be Locked On Reds every single day.
We still didn't talk about Alex Young.
I mean, a little bit, but hey, 3 episodes in a row talking about Arnaldo Lantigua. How about that, Steve? Give us that name.
Aruba. Kokomo.